proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
This is going to be a harder one.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Okay.
Hey, pretty girl.
We found out we were expecting our second child early of 2009, due end of October, and had a pretty healthy pregnancy. I was excited about this pregnancy to experience all this with Brian alongside me, to go through all this and have his help, since we hadn't done this together before. Without a little lactose intolerance that came with the pregnancy, all went well and everything seemed to be going fine. The heat of Kansas was kind of killing me. We had a lot of yard cleanup still to do, and Brian wanted help with weeding, and every time I bent over I thought I was going to throw up, so I was not a whole lot of help that summer. That was pretty hard and surprising to me because I did all sorts of work and stuff while pregnant with Meredith, and so it was hard to have to slow down and try to meet expectations and make all that work. We had not gone through any labor classes together. Of course, I went through them in North Carolina with my mom and my friend, and when we were here, we thought, well, maybe we should do classes together. And I talked to my OB, and they didn't have any classes that were local. And after a tour of labor and delivery, they had an online course that we could take, and we brought that information home and tried to do it, and our internet was so slow we sat there staring at the video, just buffering. So we gave up on that and decided to go with my memory and my book from my last class to try to get us through that, through the labor. I had a friend, though, from my mom's group that is a doula, and she offered her services, and so I was excited to have her there to help. I'm not sure that Brian was super excited, but it was good to have her there as a support. And now we're still new in the community and trying to get our feet on the ground. We don't have family nearby, and so trying to figure out what to do when I went into labor with our daughter Meredith. And we had volunteered to lead a small group for church, and this couple signed up, and we got to be good friends with them, and so asked if they could help when the time came. And so we had them lined up to take care of Meredith, since our baby's due date was kind of in the bad time of the year for either of our parents to come and break away from their obligations to help. So we had things kind of lined up for going into labor and delivery. He was a little late. He did not come at the end of October. It was after Halloween and first week in November. And I woke up a little after midnight and figured out, okay, this is not Braxton Hicks. I'm dealing with labor. So turned on my bedside light, and Brian popped out of bed. What? I think I'm in labor. And off we went. Brian got all dressed and ready, and I think we had our bags packed and all that was set, and I'm walking laps around the house, just kind of breathing, trying to get through. We called our friends to come out, and they made great time getting out there, and I'm still doing laps, trying to figure out, okay, what are we doing? And I think Brian was making sure the coffee pot was ready or getting firewood in. I'm not entirely sure. I just was doing laps going, when are we leaving? He was getting everything settled and prepared and making sure all was set for our friend and our daughter. We left for the hospital about 2:30 in the morning and got there, and the intake process is slow, and we're getting through that, and they offer, do you want to go in the hot tub? I'm like, no, I'm dying of heat. I want to get in a cold shower. I got in the cold shower, and poor Brian got soaked in the process. And at that point, I think I started to have the urge to push. And I never seem to be aware of that. I just am going with whatever signals I'm getting. And so I think someone said, are you feeling the urge to push? I'm like, oh yeah, that. So they get me back in the bed, call the nurses back in, and I don't really know exactly what happened at that point. It was kind of chaotic, and next thing I remember was, don't push. And I'm looking at everyone like, what am I supposed to do when I'm not supposed to push? How am I supposed to do this? And luckily, my doula said, pant. You need to pant. So I'm panting through contractions, and I don't know, a couple of contractions, and finally look at the nurses and go, what are we waiting for? What?
Nothing. I remember.
Yeah.
We had some nurses that were too scared to deliver a baby without the doctor there. And once I figured that out, I think the look on my face convinced them that we were going to have the baby right then. Because I looked down, and one nurse was actually holding it. Look, she had her hand on my son's head, but half of his head was out of the birth canal. Just, what are we waiting for? The baby's here, let's go.
Yes, so they finally said, okay, you can push. So I don't even think I waited for the next contraction. I was done, and pushed him out, and he came right out, and that was the most fabulous feeling ever. And then the doctor walked in, and I said, hi, he's over there, the baby. And so they took care of things. But he had come so fast. I had tested positive for group B strep, and so they do the antibiotics, and I might have gotten one dose in. I'm not even sure. I was supposed to get 2 doses. I don't even know if I got the whole first dose in before he arrived. This was also during the height of swine flu, or H1N1, and so they had labor and delivery kind of in lockdown. No visitors other than Dad. Couldn't bring our daughter up. We were kind of lucky that we could let our doula come in. But because we didn't get the full dose of antibiotics, had to stay for 2 days, and things seemed to go pretty well. He was a voracious eater, and my milk wasn't in yet. And so finally we get discharged and head to pick up our daughter, and spent a little time at our friend's house, letting them see our son Simon. And we get home, and I think I fell asleep on the couch, and we had our newborn in a little seat chair thing that he was laying in, and I think Brian,
Yeah, we put our son in a little rocking chair. It has a vibrate mechanism on it, and we have hardwood floors, and he's all fine, so I go to pay attention to our daughter, and the chair starts vibrating on the hardwood floor. I thought, well, that's odd. How did the vibration thing turn on? Because the switch is pretty hard, and I look over, and our son is having a seizure. Been home for 2 hours, and he's having a seizure.
So Brian alerts me, and pop awake, and he was unresponsive. He wasn't coming out of the seizure, and so we packed everything up and got everyone in the car and headed straight to the ER. And that was really hard. It was really hard seeing our 2-day-old son like that. And our daughter was 2 years old at this point. We get to the ER, and they're, all the staff surround him trying to get an IV started in him. And of course he's so little, they're having troubles. And so they're poking him and trying to get things figured out, and trying to just hold it together. And I think I was doing pretty good, but I'm 2 days postpartum. I'm probably not doing as well as I think I am. and trying to, be there for our daughter. And Brian's trying to, keep us all in check, really, not lose it emotionally. And I don't think he stopped seizing in the ER, and then he started again, didn't he?
He stopped seizing before we got to the ER, and then he had another one in front of the staff, so it wasn't just our word. So.
And they were on the phone with Children's Hospital to figure out, what they needed to do, and they decided to life flight him to Kansas City. And this helicopter couldn't take any other passengers, so we went home to go get packed and get ready to drive 2 hours to Kansas City. And of course, I'm in a hurry to let's just get there. I want to be there and, support our son, be there, find out what's going on, kind of thing. And Brian made sure we packed appropriately, got the things we needed, were prepared. We stopped at the church and said a prayer, and then headed on our way. So we're on our way to Kansas City, and we are calling ahead to find out where to stay, what we needed to do to figure that part out. And we mentioned that we have our 2-year-old daughter, and they say, turn around, take her, leave her with someone. This is going to be easier if you don't have her with you. And we don't have anyone to do that with, so we just kept on going. And they set us up in a hotel room that was near the hospital for a night until we could get into the Ronald McDonald House, which was a wonderful place that we could stay until we could get things figured out with our son. So we got to Children's Mercy Hospital, and they had Simon in NICU and in isolation because they didn't know what was causing his seizures, if he had gotten an infection during delivery or what was causing the problem. And so they had him in isolation. And we got up there, and they start asking questions of, how we're feeling, because it's H1N1. And I went into labor with a cold. I had a cold going in. And so I had the sniffles, and then I got some booster shot after delivery, and they told me, side effect is you'll have a low-grade fever. So I'm running a low-grade fever, and I got the sniffles, and they're like, yeah, you don't get to come in. And so I'm in tears at this point. I don't know what's wrong, what this means. Our son having seizures. What were we in for? And my milk was coming in, and I was just kind of a mess at that point. And they hand me a pump and say, well, you can pump, and we'll give him your milk. And that was about all I could do. Brian was able to go and visit him. And they had gotten him stabilized. He wasn't having any more seizures. And then it was just a series of tests trying to figure out what was causing the seizures. And eventually, I was able to go up and see him. I think they pulled him out of isolation. They determined it wasn't an infection. And so after a lot of tests, and my parents came out to kind of help, and our daughter was having a blast because she got to play on the playground, and she wasn't allowed in the hospital, really. So playing, and the Ronald McDonald House was wonderful. They had lots of things for her to do and resources for us. So that was good. And finally, it was just determined that was his freebie seizures. I guess you're allowed a freebie seizure in your life, and if he ever has them again, he will have to go through a battery of tests to find out what's the cause of it. So we don't know what caused it and why it happened. It hasn't happened since then, thank goodness. And but it was an extremely stressful situation for our family. So we got through that crazy, it was a week that we were up there, and we got home and started settling into life. And processing that week, it was kind of eye-opening to me, thinking back on things from that week. I always knew Brian was a planner. He was always prepared. You know, his truck always had all the possible things you might need to help someone on the side of the road or whatever. And so I knew he was a well prepared, planned, planning kind of guy. But I guess it surprised me when I went into labor. I'm ready to go, and he's doing all these things. I'm like, what are we doing? And when we went to Kansas City, there, it was, more measured, and making sure that we were taking care of things and not just running off half cocked. And I think that, in the time I was like, well, maybe this is military training kicking in, and just, taking care of business kind of thing. And he held it together. I don't remember him getting real emotional. He was there and strong, and just making sure, we were all taken care of. Sometime after the fact, I don't remember exactly when, after all this happened, he told me that he had to just let out the emotions, and he did that outside, away from the house, so I didn't see or hear any of that, because he was holding it all in, trying to be strong for all of us. But this was a really stressful experience for us.
At the time, I was glad of my military training, and I drew on that experience and strength just to kick into crisis management mode, pack the emotions away, and do what needs to be done. And like you say, don't go off half cocked. Maybe we could have went to the labor and delivery a little sooner. I'm sorry about that, but our son is on a life flight with the best care that's available, and us leaving the house without diapers and a change of clothes for our daughter, or speeding down the interstate and getting tickets, was just going to take more time and more money. And it was hard, but I just did what I had done for years in the military and just responded appropriately. We got home, and what I remember is I left you and Simon and Meredith in the house with your parents, and everybody sitting on the couch and doting over the baby. Like should have happened the first time we came home, instead of having to deal with a seizure. And I went outside to do something in the garage, and I got halfway across the driveway and fell to my knees and just screamed. But after a few seconds of that, I stopped myself, and I don't know exactly the words that were in my head at the time, but looking back, what I see is that experience cemented in my mind the fact that life was awful and terrible, and I had to be ready for any danger, anytime, any place. That was my responsibility as a dad and a husband, and I knew how to do that. And emotions, I was going to have to figure out a way to deal with those. I knew that, but I didn't know how yet. And so I just did what I was familiar with from the military. And I clamped down and locked down, and I was at war again, basically. I didn't know who the enemy was, but I was applying the skills I had learned. To say it in more mental health terms, I got locked into fight or flight. And I accepted that. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time. I knew nothing about how PTSD does that to you, but I embraced it and figured that's what I needed to do to live life. Because if your son can have a seizure 2 hours after getting home, then anything can happen in life. And I knew a lot of terrible things can and did happen.
those were tough days.
Yeah. Still hard to remember.
So it was from there, we kind of just had to get back into life. Our 2-year-old daughter was not impressed with her younger brother. He would cry and we'd say, go talk to Simon. And she'd go over and kind of look at him like, oh, what's your problem? And then she'd come back to us and go, can we take him back? I think there's something wrong with him. Nope, sorry, he's ours. But Brian had to go back to work, and I was on maternity leave for 6 weeks, and then back to my work, which was, still remote, so I was still at home with the kids, but, doing work and taking care of the kids and household and all that.
It's probably worth saying that I was leaned on pretty heavily to get back to work as fast as I could because there was a contract on the line. That week in Kansas City did not impress my boss.
Yeah, so Brian was back at it pretty quick. At this point, Brian was pretty serious, didn't seem to find joy in life. Kind of what I expected of, a new baby and all of that kind of stuff. It just seemed very muted, and I don't, we had a not normal beginning with Simon. There was a lot of stress there, and so, maybe that was part of it, but I also, it wasn't what I expected. I guess I had expectations, but just, he seemed pretty sober about a lot of life with the newborn. And I kind of expected to see Brian be more involved in helping with the baby. I did all that the first time by myself, and I was capable of doing it, but I had these expectations that he would be jumping in and helping more, and I kind of felt like I was still doing a lot of it by myself, and it was probably a pretty classic thing that people sometimes do, is just, well, can't you see that X, Y, and Z, or this could be done? It's obvious. Like, I shouldn't have to ask, and I'm terrible about asking for help. But I assumed he would just jump in and figure it out, and that was not working, and I felt like we were often not on the same team. He was dealing with work stuff, and I was dealing with all the rest. It's kind of how it felt to me. That's probably not a accurate picture, but that's how it felt, and it kind of felt like me and the kids were against him. Like, we weren't, we were out to get him, to make his life difficult, to keep him up at night, and Simon did not sleep well and wanted to be moving constantly, and so I would be walking around the house with him, and that would wake Brian up, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, I'm up, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make your life difficult, but that was it just, there seemed to be a disconnect, and I couldn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. Just, there was a lot of anger, like we were doing this on purpose, to make his life hard, and probably all PTSD things. Again, I had no clue what I was dealing with, and neither did Brian.
Still hard.
Yeah, it was still hard. I think at this point, this was, for me, looking back, this was the beginning of me kind of falling into darkness. I don't know if I had depression or not. Maybe I did. My memory of this time is kind of gray and dark feeling and looking, even in my memories. It got very lonely. I started to pull back from friends and family and doing probably all the things that a caregiver should not do. Again, I didn't know that I was a caregiver beyond being a mom, and that kind of caregiving. But I started just taking on things like, okay, I have to take these things on to just make things work, to make everything okay. And I thought I could do all of that. But that was kind of the beginning when I started to see, oh, this is not going to be anything like what I expected or thought, as far as growing our family together. Just hard times.
All I can say is I'm sorry. That doesn't help. I look back on those times and am ashamed, even though they were completely predictable and happen quite often, especially in the veteran community with PTSD. None of that excuses my behavior, but what do you, what do you do? What do you say now? That was a dark time.
I think we were both doing the best we could with the resources we had, and it wasn't easy and it wasn't pretty sometimes.
Love you.
I love you too. I'm glad we're here.
Me too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good job.
Thank you.